Welcome, everyone, to this week's segment of For Such a Time as This from the University of St. Thomas. This whole idea about For Such a Time as This is that Houston is approaching its 200th anniversary in 2036. The heart of Houston, as we know, we've played off of this for years, but it's becoming truer every day. The heart of Houston, embedded in the word Houston, is UST. So the heart of Houston is UST, University of St. Thomas. And we're looking at doing in this ongoing series because we know that the times we're living in today are very challenging in more ways than one. So we're trying to always look at how can we address the issues and people who are doing things and making things happen, even in the midst of all this COVID-19 and chaos and somewhat confusion, but yet there's always hope and joy and the gospel. And those are the things that keep us going and keep us safe and sound as we go forward. Joining me today is someone who understands all those things I just mentioned, who understands them well, who lives them every day, along with his great leadership of the organization that he heads. And that's none other than our good friend Paul Beck, who's the president of Cristo Rey Jesuit College Preparatory School here in Houston. And so we're just so happy and glad to have Paul join us. There's also a wonderful relationship with Cristo Rey now and the University of St. Thomas, which Paul will explain a little later. But I'm just going to stop there, let Paul introduce himself a little bit, and then we'll go from there. Welcome, Paul. So great to have you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Larry. It's very nice to be here. It's good to see you. You look just.
Thank you. Well, let's just dive in.
Yeah.
Cristo Rey is a unique school in its own way and setting. Those of us who kind of remember when it came to Houston, involved in the very beginning, and I'm happy to say I was part of that early crowd, the first crowd, with Father T.J. Martinez and that whole group. But you and your staff and team have taken it to, I would say it this way, the next level. And that next level is important because you're getting to really engage with more students and to help more students. Understand the model of Cristo Rey, which is somewhat different. The model works, and it works so well and so needed in our times today because of the ongoing issues of poverty and all the things that surround that. So tell us about Cristo Rey.
Right. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are a Jesuit-sponsored high school. We're located just north of Hobby Airport in what used to be the Our Lady of Mount Carmel High School building. We've been here this is our 12th year. And as Larry said, we started 12 years ago under the guidance of our founding president, a fellow by the name of Father T.J. Martinez, who was an amazing person. Unfortunately, he contracted cancer and passed away, and the presidency passed on to a wonderful man by the name of Paul Beck, who ran the school for about 5 years, and then I've been privileged enough to run it for the last 2 years. So our school is designed for students that are economically disadvantaged. And one of the things that the Cristo Rey concept recognized over 20 years ago when the first Cristo Rey school started in Chicago was that students that are economically disadvantaged are not going to college, they're not getting in, they're not graduating from college. The actual national average for this demographic is less than 10%. And there was no reason for that to happen other than they just didn't have the opportunities. So this school was set up to provide these students with those opportunities. And we do it in a number of ways. We do it through our corporate work study program. So all of our students actually go to work 1 day a week, and they work at companies all over town, and you name it. These are highly respected companies like Chevron and Vincent and Elkins and MD Anderson, and the list goes on and on. And they work with people who embrace them and love them and care for them and mentor them, because virtually all of our kids are first generation kids. They're not familiar with college. They're not familiar with the concept of college. But now they're working with people that not only are treating them with respect in a professional work setting, but they're teaching them about college at the same time. And our students are earning half the cost of their salary through this employment. So that's one of the beauties of this school, is it balances the ability for our students to actually work for part of their education, learn while they're working. And then obviously, we're building our faith through our Ignatian pedagogy every single day at this school. So it's been a win-win-win in many ways. Every single one of our graduating classes, there have been 8 of them since we started, have gone to college. Every single one of them, all 800 of them. And like I said before, the odds of them going to college otherwise are really not very good. But we know that if you spend time with them and if you love them and give them respect and give them the opportunity, they will get it done. And it's been amazing, just amazing.
You said 4 key words: time, love, respect, and opportunity. And I think that's really the challenge today going forward, is to create those understandings that this work that you do so well through Cristo Rey and others that are trying to fill that void and vacuum of young people coming from backgrounds that they have, that they're coming from, is not as complicated as people want to make it. The will and the water, I always say, if you have the will and the water, you figure the rest out real quick. But it is a calling to understand the social, economic, and I might even add sometimes the political realities that impact these young people's lives in the communities and neighborhoods that they live in, to no fault of their own, or their parents, or their grandparents. And so the question becomes, when we reach out to try to understand and grow ourselves to the reality of those young people, I think what I've seen, Paul, is so often we educate not only parents, but we educate the community. You definitely educate your over 155 corporate sponsors, and growing, that number keeps growing, as to why they need to be involved in this. You educate them to the connection, importance of this. Tell us a little bit about that, because I've seen some of your, when we were still having galas for real and not virtually, I've seen some of the corporate folk at your galas who I've engaged in conversation said, being involved with the school changed my whole perspective on poverty, changed my whole perspective on economic disadvantaged students. It just changed my world.
Yeah, well, I can speak to it very clearly, because I was on that side, right? I worked in the corporate world up until, last year, when I came on board for a company called Macquarie Group, which is a large Australian financial service company. 400 people work in our office in Houston, and yet every single one of them knew about our Cristo Rey students. We started sponsoring the students 12 years ago when the school opened, and they knew about them. We still have students there, by the way. They cared about them. They lifted the office, and this is an investment banking office, and you can imagine, everybody's flying around and focused on a lot of ungodly kind of things, money and themselves. And these children come in and they work their tails off, and they show them what true grit and love and aspiration is all about. So they made our office better. And in fact, I'll tell you a story, wonderful story. When we first started sponsoring, we sponsored through a group called the Macquarie Foundation. And it's a matching foundation. Basically, they match all your contributions. And I drafted a proposal to them. If you go to the Macquarie Foundation page, the very first line is, "We do not give to religious causes nor to private schools," as you would expect. It's a large corporation.
Right.
So I drafted this whole email explaining what Cristo Rey Jesuit was all about. Included, there was a really cool video that was done of the original Cristo Rey School up in Chicago with a fellow by the name of Father John Foley, who founded it. It was on 60 Minutes. Sent all that down to them, and I didn't really know what the answer was going to be. When I said I sent it down to them, they were down in Sydney, Australia. Called them a couple of days later. Said, "Listen, I sent you that email, where are you at?" And he said, "Hey, mate, no, we're good with that." And I said, "Now you realize this is a private school and it is a religious cause." And they said, "Listen, if we can't get behind this, then we don't need to be in existence. This is exactly what we're trying to accomplish." And that changed me and my perspective on all this, because I knew now that this organization transcends its Catholicity, it transcends. It really does show people that this gap that exists between people that are economically disadvantaged and the wealthy can be closed. We have the ability to do it. We have the ability to do it through education. And that's what we're trying to do here. Great story.
Really great story. Let me just add this, because I've engaged and have gotten to know some of your alumni who've gone off to college and now have come back and are working for some of the companies they worked with when they were students, because they saw their work ethic and understood how well they understood their business. Let them go off and get their college education. Let them know there was a place welcoming for them when they returned, and some of them did return. But here's what that says. As you and I were growing up, we had opportunities because of our parents, or because of whom our parents knew, or because in my case, they just knew I was my father's son and they knew my father, and therefore by fiat, I was able to. They gave me a chance. They gave me opportunities. I developed relationships with adults in corporate world. This is 1967, 68, 66. And those relationships that I made and developed then carried me throughout my life. Those contacts, those networks, back then allowed me to do things far ahead of my time during that era for any little colored Negro boy from Orange, Texas, to be able to do because of those connections, networks, and relationships. And that's the other valuable thing that I see these students get by entering into that corporate world early, by making those connections, those networks, and those relationships.
Yeah, and you graduate from high school with 4 years of professional experience.
Right.
People have that on their resumes.
I'd have loved to have that. I would love to have that in mind back then. So.
Yeah, and the other thing, Larry, that I find interesting is, when I first came here, you talk to the freshmen and they're like these little scared mice in the corner. They're very, very insecure. And then, I've got senior girls coming in my office, pounding on my desk saying, Mr. Beck, these are some things that you need to do to make this school a better place. And as I'm listening to them, I'm thinking, thank God, this is the transformation that occurs.
Right.
A lot of that self-confidence comes from the interactions that they have through their core partners. It's not just through our teachers. Our teachers are wonderful. They're incredible. They're loving and giving, but we expand those opportunities through these relationships that they build, that they will carry on for many, many years. They're references for them to get into in college and get employment in college. And we've leveraged it through our relationship with the University of St. Thomas to a wonderful opportunity as well.
Yeah. My first job while I was 13 years old, and as I was getting out of college and graduate school, I reached back to that gentleman, actually to his family, who remembered me, and they wrote a reference letter, about what a hard worker and dedicated young man I was even back then. So it really shows paid off. But the point you just mentioned is also invaluable. Seeing the world of work, seeing how the concepts of work, how a corporate culture operates, to bring some of those ideas back, as you said, to you. All that is that fabric, that web that we talk about, that's so important in a world that is constantly growing and changing as we're in right now. And that you can't not put a price tag on. That is invaluable. And I think we keep saying if Cristo Rey didn't exist, we'd have to create it and make it happen. Well, the question becomes now is how do we replicate that?
Right.
And grow it, because that need in the social economic reality that we're in now, that need is only going to grow more and more. That reality is on the grow.
Unfortunately, you're right.
Is going to grow only more and more.
Yeah, no, you're right. Unfortunately, the interesting statistic is that 80% of the students in Houston Independent School District fall in our demographic. And if you look at the Kinder Institute's study on who Houston is hiring, 5% of the jobs that were hired last year in Houston were jobs that required post-secondary school education. So you've got 80% of the students that are in our demographic of which less than 10% go to college and successfully graduate from college. And yet all the jobs are requiring college education. So you've got like this slow moving train wreck happening right before our eyes. And you're right. I mean, we've got to address it. You know, we've got 600 or 500 students here. I'd like it to be, 5,000 students, but it will come.
It'll come. And that reality that you just described is I think, a very interesting conundrum for HISD, who is still trying to shift to understand what it means to educate a population of the new unempowered majority. As you just said, that's our future workforce. All those kids who we used to label as minorities, underrepresented, underprivileged, under all those negative labels, all that's got to go away. That is your future workforce. If you don't figure out a way to educate them, you don't have a future.
Right.
So all those labels we need to set aside. We need to figure out how to educate those children. And I keep telling them, don't get excited just because I can call you the majority now. I got to put a word in front of you. You're the new unempowered majority. The empowerment part is education. Right. So I think the challenge going forward is for the community to understand, and you already mentioned Kin Institute and our good friend Steve Kleinberg and Changing Demographics, to understand that this community is, and I learned this from the police reform task force that I chaired for Mayor Turner just recently. Houston is not the community that many people think it is. It has changed. It has changed demographically. It has changed economically. And here's the thing that I always kind of mention because I think it brings it into perspective. Yes, we're the 4th largest city in America, soon hopefully to be the 3rd after the census. We're the most diverse city in America. Yes, that's all true. We're also the most segregated city in America because of income. And we're also the most gated community in America. And so the chance for us to have this full understanding of how to help the other, first of all, how do you define the other today? That's changing every day.
Right.
But to be engaged in the lives of the future of this city, which is these young brown and Black children, it's not an option anymore. This is not optional work. This is work that we all have to engage in so that we will have a brighter future for everyone.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think the partnerships that we built with the corporations have been very good for that because they see it. A good example is there's a Cristo Rey school in Detroit, and they have a partnership with General Motors. General Motors employs most of the students in that school. And the reason they do it is because they want to hire them someday. They need engineers, they need accountants, they need people in their workforce, and they want these students to do it. So, we're building some of the same type of relationships ourselves and, with you guys at UST.
Well, let's bridge to that right quick. Tell us about this wonderful relationship now with UST. I think it's a great bridge and a great logical carryover from Cristo Rey to St. Thomas.
I will tell you, the students, all of our students are going to college. Now, not all of them are graduating. The one thing that holds them back most often is the money. The money, because they just don't have the funds to get them all the way through college. They need to go to college pretty much at, with either a full ride scholarship or with scholarships that's supplemented with a small amount of borrowing. University of St. Thomas, great Catholic private school right here in Houston. Very critical, that in Houston part, because it allows our families to keep their kids close, and that's important. That's important to them. They don't want them, traveling off to the East Coast or the West Coast. We do have that. We do.
But it's a cultural thing. It's a
cultural thing, and it's important. So here you have this wonderful school. It's private. It's not cheap. But we've worked an arrangement with them that our corporate partners are continuing to sponsor our kids after they graduate in college. And the money so they're working while they're in college, and that money supplemented with a small amount of student loans and a large scholarship which the school has been wonderful about providing our kids with, gets them gets them all the way through college without them coming up with any cash. So, and they're continuing to work for these companies, and very high likelihood they'll continue to work for them after they graduate.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's called the Rising Star Program at University of St. Thomas. We call our side of that our corporate work study program, but they meld together beautifully, and it's been just a great relationship of really. We had, I think, 5 students 2 years ago when we first started. Last year we had 35 students.
Oh, wonderful!
So that's over a third of our senior class, and fully expect it to be as popular this year as it was last year. It's just a great program.
Let's speak to, for a moment, the other aspect of the education that one receives at a Cristo Rey school and the Jesuit tradition of developing men and women for others. Because I think that's so important in today's society, to have not only the great education, to have that great corporate connection now because of the work study program, but there's also this other side that we do intrinsically through all the courses within Cristo Rey that really develops that other piece of oneself that as a human being that one really needs to have fully developed. And I think that I've worked with that theme for years. I understand what it means, but it really is a unique thing, developing men and women for others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, servant leaders.
Yep.
The pillars of our Jesuit faith or Jesuit education are, being loving, being religious, committed to social justice, being intellectually competent. These are what ultimately define our students. We really want them to be, it's not just an academic exercise, it's the whole person. We want them to exit with not only great academic and intellectual competence, but we want them to be, faithful servants of God.
Mm-hmm.
And we want them really to place their service of God before themselves. And if we've accomplished that, then we've done our job. We've done our job, because that is, that's the life thing, right?
Right.
We're not trying to get them into Harvard. We're trying to get them into heaven. You've heard that lots of times. That really is the core of what we're trying to do, and it's it's something we work on every single day, and it's so important. It's so vital.
And I think coming from that base, foundational base out of Cristo Rey to a wonderful place like the University of St. Thomas that can build on that as a Catholic university. And you mentioned the key elements of the servant leadership piece and the social justice piece. To be able to continue to cultivate that in your academic career, in your personal, professional, and public lives through the university and beyond, I think is that added value that we need in our world today of the lack of civility, of the lack of concern about the other, and all the other things we've experienced and are experiencing every day, that to create a cadre of young people who understand that and are really ready, willing, and able to dive deeply into those issues and to understand that change and is important, and that you have to do it through systematic change and policy change, and all those things become very important. So here's my goal. I'm just going to throw this out. Now that I have students from Cristo Rey at the University of St. Thomas, I want to see them not only get their undergraduate degree from St. Thomas, I want to see them get their master's degree from St. Thomas, and I want them to go on, because they will understand it better than anyone else, that PhD program that University of St. Thomas has in ethical leadership. That the basis of that is social justice. But to be able to have that doctorate in ethical EDD, in ethical leadership, I think those students will probably understand that better than anyone else, because they've lived it their whole life to that completion.
That is so true. Absolutely. One of the things I find interesting are our essays on our college entrance applications. The essays are incredible, because you talk about stories. These children have lived lives that I personally can't comprehend, and the things that they deal with, some of the pain they deal with and the fights that they deal with, but you wouldn't know it. You meet them and they are just loving children with enthusiasm. They want to learn, they want to grow. And Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, what you're talking about is at the end of the day, just teaching them happiness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I had a high flying job with a big investment bank, and I've never been happier with this job. I don't
Right.
make much money, but I've never been happier. I mean, it's true joy, and we're teaching them in high school what it took 40 years to learn.
But I think again, the joy of the gospel is something that you and I've talked about. We understand it. That's who we are. That's our background and history. But when I pair the joy of the gospel, as you mentioned, with those young people's daily, I call them their daily lived experiential realities, that are different, not better than, not more than, not less than, just different than many people will ever experience, as you said. If I can wed that happiness and joy that comes from those challenges that they've already faced with the joy of the gospel and the happiness that brings additional happiness, now I have a human being, not just an individual or person. I have a human being who's ready, willing, and able to be of service to other human beings because they understand we and us and not I and me. And I think that once you take away that selfishness and you get rid of that materialism, and you understand that there's something called a higher calling, if you will, then I really have young people, and I've seen it. I've seen that light bulb go off and that glow they have. It's almost like a halo glow they have. They can't wait to dive in and help and serve. That's just a wonderful thing to observe. I mean, I get excited when I see it.
Yeah, no, you're right. You've got a teacher, you've got a leader. We have 4 teachers in the school today that graduated in our first graduating class.
Oh, wow.
And it's, it's just amazing. It's amazing. And they're all so very good at what they do. 2 of them are St. Thomas graduates, by the way.
All right.
And they have their master's from St. Thomas. So there you go. They have not got their PhD, Larry.
All right, but it's there waiting for them. And since they're educators, it's geared toward educators. I keep pushing that further.
Yeah, no, we need to work on that, don't we?
And we do well, because I was on the board of advisors of the College of Ed and Social Sciences when we started the program, and at that time when we checked around the country, I think St. Thomas is the only Catholic university offering a PhD in ethical leadership. And that ethical leadership piece today, as I said earlier, that's invaluable. You can take that and go into corporate America and try to help change that culture. You can take that anywhere and do anything with it. Because I think ethics going forward, the thing that has been somewhat, shall we say, seen sometimes as, okay, yeah, it's there, but it's not. The lack of the ethical focus on the social, economic, and political realities we're facing has gotten us in some of the situations we're in now. Because it is a moral, ethical question of how you treat human beings. And when you take that out of the equation, you take out the ability to have this thing that, not only forget empathy, you can't even get to accepting the other person as a full human being, let alone getting to any kind of empathetical response. So that's why Catholic education to me, and I went to Catholic school from kindergarten throughout, from college to seminary and beyond. I know that how I see the world because of that lens and filter that I come out of that educational process allows me to sit and have dialogue with other human beings who have not had that grounding, whether you want to call it philosophical or theological grounding, to be able to see the world differently and to try to help them see the world differently. Not as a preaching or proselytizing or evangelization or shoving down, never trying to persuade or dissuade anybody. I think you and I touched on this once in our earlier conversation. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, fact, and perspective. I mean, they'll opinion and perspective and belief, but not their own fact. There's only one truth. And so we got to keep that in front of people. How we do that lovingly today is a challenge, is it not? But we have to do it. We're called to do it.
It is. And I don't really, those are all very profound statements, Larry. I've often felt like ethical leadership ought to be a prerequisite for running for office.
Yes.
That you should take a college level leadership course before you're allowed to run for office. But you're right. It's and the momentum seems to be going the wrong way, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Concerns me.
Yes, it does. No, it is going the wrong way. So let's jump into that. You gave me a good lead-in segue. Since this is we're talking on a Catholic University's website, we're talking about a Catholic high school. We are about to have our second Catholic president, in a 60-year gap between the first one and now this one. And I think what comes with that is an opportunity to engage with America in the issue of politics from a different perspective. By the way, politics is not a dirty word. Politics is this. Politics, the definition of politics. Politics begins where consensus ends. Politics begins where consensus ends. If I can get to consensus, to agreement, to compromise, to negotiate, it need not bleed over into the political arena, because we know what happens once it gets into the political arena. So politics begins where consensus ends. So we get a chance to engage with American political system from a Catholic perspective, and hopefully Catholic social teaching. Now, I gotta say this, I've been impressed. President-elect Biden has quoted twice now from the hymnal, the song, "Be Not Afraid." In his first address as president-elect the other day, he used that phrase, "Be not afraid," and he referenced it back to the hymnal and the gospel. I think it's also an opportunity because of our Pope, wonderful Pope Francis. He says this about politics. Politics is something more noble than posturing, marketing, and media spins. It has to be more about the solidarity of who we are together in Christ as human beings. And get much better than that. And so I'm looking forward to being able to talk about Catholic social teaching by having a Catholic in, excuse me, in the White House as president. Not that he's a perfect human being. We're not going to get into all of that about his beliefs on certain political issues versus his beliefs on religious issues. But nonetheless, it is an opportunity, is it not? For us, at least as Catholics, to begin to talk about Catholic social teaching as it applies to politics.
I hope you're right. I absolutely hope you're right. One of the things I've loved that he said is consistent talk about unification, bringing it back together. I hope it's not rhetoric. I pray it's not rhetoric. I pray that he really, and he's obviously a good person. He's lived a good life and been in public service for a long time. So you just pray that that God really does carry him through in his goal of really unifying this country, because that's what we need right now.
Well, we're all in the same boat.
That's true.
To probably not do justice to Pope Francis's new encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, which I love that name, Fratelli Tutti. But we're all in the same boat. And what he tells us in that encyclical, the human fraternity and solidarity that we all must have because of the favor of the gospel, which brings us together as human beings. I think if we can get that solidarity going, as you said, that unity that he speaks to, if he can bring that closer together, then we have, I think, a great shot at pulling this off. And if we can't, then we really are in trouble, in deep trouble, as they used to say, not just little trouble. So we got about a minute left, Paul, so I'm going to give you a chance to kind of wrap up. Tell us anything we haven't touched on that you want us to know about Cristo Rey. Tell us how we can help and be of service to those who may view this to the school.
Sure. No, thank you. Once again, Larry, thank you for having me on the show. I mentioned that the students earn half of the cost of their education here. The other half we raise. So all of our students do pay a small amount of tuition, but it's very little. It's a fraction of what they would pay, a small fraction of what they would pay at any other private school. So we go out and raise through donor funding virtually half of the cost of their education year after year. So if you're interested in the school and volunteering and contributing, in any way, look us up on our web page, CristoReyJesuit.com. We'd be happy to have you come down for a tour of the school and meet some of the students. We're all in masks and we're social distancing, but we're getting by. And And it's, when you do enter this school, and Larry, I know you know this, you do feel the presence of God. And
yes, you do. Yes, you do. Very much.
he comes in the form of those young men and women that walk our hallways. And once again, just, thank you for the time that you've given me today. I've enjoyed listening to you.
No, thank you.
You are a philosopher, Larry.
No, thank you, Paul. Thank you. I just want to make a quick closing comment because I think it lends itself in this post-reality between election and the January 20th swearing in, this in-between time, if you will, it's an interesting time because what it shows is the shift that we're in is a 40 to 50 year shift. Let me explain what I mean by that. It's not anymore a question of left or right or left, conservative or liberal. It's front and back. What you see being played out now are those who feel primarily stuck at the back of the line versus those at the front of the line who are perceived as keeping what they have and not losing anything. Those who are focused on not losing anything will do anything to keep those who have been perceived at the back of the line so that I can remain at the front of the line. Now, how you bridge that gap, because when people have something to fear that they're losing as opposed to something they're gaining, they become very entrenched. And so I think, again, we are called as Catholic Christians to help the gospel and use the gospel to explain to human beings on all sides, all definitions, all labels, that it doesn't have to be that way. There's another way. In fact, it's a better way. It's a way to happiness and joy that Paul talked about. It's the ability to see the other human being as a fully developed human being, just like you are. And to understand that we all have a role in that educational process. So that's kind of the hope for the new year. We got to get past this in-between time. We got to get past these next few months. That January 21st, we can start moving forward on that unity and unifying human beings together. Because if we do not, the brightness of the future is not bright. The hope for the future is not hopeful. It's going to be very painful for wherever you sit on the spectrum. Wherever you land on the spectrum, it's going to be painful. And if we know it's coming, this is what adulthood in Christ means: seizing the opportunity for creativity and initiative in the place of complaining about what cannot be done. Adulthood in Christ means seizing the opportunity for creativity and initiative in the place of complaining about what cannot be done. So it's the answering of the calling. It's the answering of the calling that we all heard over our lives in the simple, wonderful hymn called Hush, Hush, Somebody's Calling My Name. And the response is, oh my Lord, what am I, what are we to do? That's where we are. It is time to answer the call. It is time to understand that the calling is there and available and waiting for us to answer. And we, as Catholics, as Christians, don't have a choice to not answer. It's not optional. You can't call yourself if you don't respond. So that's more than probably I needed to say, I wanted to say, or should have said, but I'm really caught in this place where we are in history now, in our society, in our culture, that if the gospel and the church had any chance of reestablishing its foothold, because let's just be honest, we've been losing Catholics left and right for the last few years. To regain that, we have a chance, like regaining that ground. This is for such a time as this. This is what it's called to do and talk about. We're going to continue to do this wonderful series through University of St. Thomas. I thank everyone for being part of this one today. Look forward to you joining us in future segments of First a Time As This. And we have some great guests lined up coming up for you. So until then, as always, be safe, be well, peace, power, and love.